Breaking news, CNN learning exclusively tonight that President Trump dictated that letter, that infamous letter from his lawyer on his health. Remember, his lawyer, we usually talk about lawyers on this program, his doctor on his health. It was back in 2015. Now, this is according to his former personal doctor, Harold Bornstein. Now, the letter was not signed by the president. There was no anything about him dictating his letter about his own health. It was signed by Bornstein. It talked about Trump's physical strength and stamina are extraordinary. That was just one line. Here's another one. If elected, Mr. Trump, I can state unequivocally, will be the healthiest individual ever elected to the presidency. Can you hear him saying that and saying, how does that sound? How does that sound? All right, this comes as Bornstein is also claiming tonight that Trump's former bodyguard and a lawyer raided his office for the president's medical records. Alex Marquardt is in front of Dr. Bornstein's office. He spoke with him today. Alex, I mean, this is pretty incredible. Let's start with the breaking news that you have. Bornstein is telling you that Trump dictated that letter.
Yeah, that's right, Aaron. We ran into Dr. Harold Bornstein right here, right outside his office on Park Avenue. And he told us in no uncertain terms, and this is the quote, Aaron, he dictated, he being Trump, he dictated that whole letter. I didn't write that letter, meaning that Trump dictated what he wanted to go into it, and essentially Bornstein wrote it up. He did say, he compared it to the movie Fargo, and he said it takes the truth and moves it in a different direction. Think about that. Now, Bornstein tells us that he was in a car with his wife when he was on the phone with then candidate Trump in December of 2015. And she was going through with Trump what he could say and what he couldn't say. Trump was dictating what he wanted in that letter. And Bornstein was saying, OK, you can say that. You can't say that. He then came here to the office. He wrote it up. Trump's office later picked it up. He said around 4 p.m. Aaron, we have reached out to the White House, but we have not gotten a response.
All right, so that's pretty incredible in and of itself. You also now, Alex, Bornstein is saying he was, quote unquote, robbed of the president's medical files. He spoke to you particularly about this encounter. What did he tell you?
Right. So he is saying this is a raid. Bornstein is saying that he was robbed. I specifically asked him, was a crime committed? He said they stole them, referring to the president's medical files. The they in that sentence are two men under the president's employ. The first, as you mentioned, is Keith Schiller, who was the president's longtime bodyguard here in New York. He then moved down to Washington with the president, worked in the White House as the head of Oval Office operations. The other person we understand is Alan Garten, who is an attorney for the Trump Organization. Now, Aaron, normally when you have medical records released, you need what's called a HIPAA released. We understand from Bornstein, he told us this afternoon, that was not signed. Instead, he says these two men barged through the back door, terrified the secretary, pushed aside the patient who was in there. Now, the White House is not contesting that they took possession of these medical files, but they are saying that it was not a raid. Instead, Aaron, they're saying that this was just standard operating procedure. Aaron. All
right, Alex, thank you very much. And as we said, Alex spoke to Dr. Bornstein, breaking that news about the dictation. And now Dr. David Shiner, who is President Obama's former physician, joins me along with Frank Bruni, a columnist for the New York Times. Dr. Shiner, let me start with you. Let me just read a little bit more to you of what was in that 2015 letter, lest anyone has forgotten. Bornstein, Trump, whoever it was, wrote, quote, Mr. Trump has had a recent complete medical examination that showed only positive results. Actually, his blood pressure, 110/65, and lab test results were astonishingly excellent. That comes after, right? He'll be the healthiest individual ever elected to the presidency, and his physical strength and stamina are extraordinary. What's your reaction, doctor, to hearing that the president dictated this letter to his doctor?
Well, it's not surprising to me. First of all, the fact that he used the word, all his lab results were positive. A physician never uses that word. If the tests are normal, you say they're negative. If they're abnormal, you say they're positive. So that should have raised suspicions immediately that it wasn't written by a physician.
And is there any issue you have ethically with this, that Trump would dictate it and his doctor would sign it?
Yeah, if the doctor signed it, it's not his medical report. I mean, it's fraudulent. I mean, I'm even wondering if Ronnie Jackson's great report on his health was written by Trump too, because he said things which were patently wrong.
Well, certainly some of it.
He said he was in such great health. Yeah. He said he was in great health, and the cardiologist said he was in the upper 25% for cardiovascular risk.
Right, which is the point Sanjay Gupta made, Frank, about that, right, with a cardiovascular disease. Look, the president exaggerates. We all know that. He loves to use words like, his extraordinary and his stamina and all this stuff. He used stamina in a tweet today, as a matter of fact. When this fits his mold, this sounds like him. Certainly.
Oh, yeah. It's funny. Now it all makes sense when you hear that he dictated this, but it's another one of those examples, and a pretty crazy one, of the extent of the lengths the president will go to, to project a certain kind of image and how little regard he has for the truth. He is, and also what a kind of shady cast of characters he gathers around him. He found a doctor willing to play so fast and loose that this guy would let Donald Trump dictate a letter about his own health, use ridiculous phrases like astonishingly excellent, right? If you use that on air, you'd be subject to ridicule for the next month, right?
I would.
And signed his name to it, the last laugh, in a sense, is on Donald Trump, because the same fast and loose guy who signed that letter then in February 2017, without authorization, starts talking to Larry Altman of The Times about the fact that Donald Trump takes Propecia and something for rosacea, and that's what triggered this quote-unquote raid, was this kind of panic that this completely untrustworthy individual had the storehouse of Donald Trump's medical records.
And Dr. Shiner, the Dr. Bornstein is describing this as a raid, right? You heard he said he was robbed, and you heard the words he used to Alex Marquardt, right? That the documents were stolen. He doesn't even have a copy, which, by the way, is against medical regulations. He said they barged in the back door, terrified his secretary. Obviously, this is not what we're hearing from the other side. They said they went in very politely and took the records. The White House press secretary was asked about it today. Let me just play the exchange for you, Dr. Shiner.
Why did Keith Schiller, who was a White House employee at the time, go and take medical records from the president's personal doctor last year?
As a standard operating procedure for a new president, the White House medical unit took possession of the president's medical records.
It was characterized as a raid. Is that your understanding of what happened? The doctors seemed to be pretty upset about it.
No, that is not my understanding.
Dr. Shiner, what is standard operating procedure? At least, what was your experience when you handed over President Obama's records?
Well, to be perfectly honest, I still have President Obama's record. I secured it so that no one else could see it, but I made a copy of everything in the record, and it was sent to the White House.
And so you sent paper documents, but you have the originals, as a doctor would ordinarily do, right? You keep a copy.